I submitted to the board, and it'll be in the minutes, but a full report. I just wanted to highlight some of the key things that we have to be looking at as we do prepare the budget or budgets for next school year. So first of all, this is from our last audit. So it goes back to FY20, and something that I know the board's aware of, but I think it's very important for our patrons to be aware of as well, and that is just shy of 90% of our budget goes to salaries and benefits. 88% goes to salaries and benefits. And so as we look at potentially the loss of the supplemental levy and the plant facilities levy, there's no way to reach reducing our budget by approximately $10 million without impacting salaries and benefits. And then you can see the other categories we have are purchase services, which was 7% of the budget, and materials and supplies, which is 5%. So I'll just say, if you pay attention to social media posts and the pot shots that people want to take at the district, they talk about wasting dollars, and I'm all for taking a hard look and saying, are we using our funds wisely? But if you look at the big picture, and literally when we're talking millions of dollars, again, 90% of that goes to salaries and benefits, and so that has to be the place that we take into consideration with the potential loss of those funds. So really there's only two ways to reduce cost from salaries and benefits. You either reduce your staff or you cut their pay, or some combination of both of those, but those are the two options we have when it comes to looking at reducing our budget. Most private businesses have the ability to reduce their staff when their budgets come tight. I'd say that's probably one of the first things they do is they start to lay off staff and make those reductions. I would say most public agencies have that same ability. In Idaho, our state legislature likes to govern very tightly how we run our school districts, and so there's some state laws that make it very difficult for us to do those staff reductions. So the first one is Idaho Code 331004. This is the use it or lose it law that basically says if we don't hire the minimum number of teachers that the state expects us to, then we lose funding from the state. So it makes no sense to lay off teachers if we're going to lose all the associated funding that goes with those positions from the state. And Guy, correct me on this. This is one of those points I should have verified with you, but that doesn't just affect the teaching positions. It's also the associated funding that goes with those, right? So so basically the way the state funding works is they identify a classroom unit that's primarily a teacher, and then they add a fraction for an administrator from that unit. They add a fraction for classified positions from that unit. So we lose all of that funding, not just the teaching positions. So we've been very tight on our teacher hiring and the reason we've been so tight is that gives us as much flexibility as we can with our dollars to keep our teacher pay high. So by hiring the fewest number of teachers, that gives us the most amount of dollars to keep their pay where we believe it should be. But every year that we lose the percentage of that, it impacts our supplemental levy. We have to use more local dollars to keep the pay where it's been. Does that make sense? So,
Scott, let me jump in real quick.
Thanks, Guy.
So the classified admin don't get reduced. What gets also reduced is the benefits associated.
The benefits, okay. Okay, so we would retain the classified and admin, but not the benefits portion. Thank you, Guy. I appreciate that.
And I'm not sure what I'm about to say is right, but let me think out loud and you can react. If we're paying the teacher that is laid off more than what the state funds, which generally we do, maybe there's some small savings to the district by laying people off.
Yep.
You lose that state funding.
Yep, there would be. Yep. So for the percentage of teachers that we pay above the state, which is our most veteran teachers, it's really anybody with 15 years of experience or more, then there would be that additional savings.
Pretty small.
Yep.
Stuff probably.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And really, for all the teachers that have 15 years of experience or less, they earn, at the most they earn is what the state funds us. So then administrative positions, again, this is a favorite target of our critics, saying that we're overstaffed and overpaid when it comes to administrative positions. So Just a few points I think it's critical for the board to be aware of, and again for our public to be aware of. We do not have that same restriction on hiring a minimum number of administrators that we have with teachers. And so we currently this year have hired 85% of the number of administrators that we're funded for. And so that 15% savings, we can turn that into additional pay for our administrators above and beyond what the state pays that. That turns out to mean that our principals end up supervising or being responsible for, on average, 380 students and 36 employees. So again, I would just say if you compare that to private industry, you're not going to find very many private industries where somebody's supervising 36 other employees. And principals just do incredible work. Everybody wants to have great teachers in the classroom, and I'll be a believer to my dying day that it takes a great principal to hire great teachers, to evaluate great teachers, to have the right conversations with our teachers to make sure everybody's meeting high expectations. You'll always have teachers that are naturally great, but to have a great teacher in every classroom takes a great principal. And I'm a believer. And one of the criticisms that I was made aware of on Facebook, I really don't follow it, but I have a wife that does, and so she's happy to share with me the information that's shared out there. But one of the interesting contrasts, or one of the criticisms was, in District 93 we pay our teachers less than District 91 does, but we pay our principals more. Now, number one, I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't sat down and done the analysis. I don't spend a lot of time looking at those comparisons. But I would say in the early 2000s, that was very much the philosophy of the district, because we couldn't match teacher pay. There was no way we could match teacher pay without a huge increase to the supplemental levy. What we could do is, with a smaller number of principals, we could increase the pay and attract great principals. And by attracting great principals, we believe we could create and attract great teachers. And I would say I think that philosophy has borne itself out, and I still fully support that we need to attract great principals into our district, and they create the cultures in their buildings that make teachers want to come here, even if it doesn't mean they make as much as neighboring districts. And then another key thing that I think is important to know is, at the district level, if you go back to 2010, which is my first year coming into the district office, we've eliminated 5 district level positions from our central office administration over that decade. We've done that at the same time that we've grown by thousands of students. And so if you look at a ratio of how many district level administrators we have compared to kids, it's almost half as many as we had back in 2010. The way we've accomplished that is we're all taking on a bigger workload. And so John Pym has taken on a position that was 2 positions in the past. In 2011, I took on 3 positions instead of the one that I was hired for, and then since then we've been able to shift some of those around. So Gordon Howard's fulfilling multiple positions. Guy is taking on additional responsibilities with supervising transportation and child nutrition. Heath and Jason and I are all sharing the additional workload from not replacing a deputy superintendent. And so, and I think that's a key thing for people to know, is when the board made the decision to buy out, I wouldn't use the word buyout, but when they made the decision to end Dr. Shackett's contract early, and Mrs. McConnell retired the same year, the combination of those 2 factors, along with us negotiating for me to accept a lower salary than Dr. Shackett had, has resulted in a savings of, I had that number in here and I hope I still do. Nope. So I've got to do the math down in my head. So Dr. Shack was earning a salary of $167,000, and because again I accepted the salary of the deputy superintendent at the time. So basically that means over 2 years we've saved $165,000. I'll make it easy on myself. So $330,000, and the negotiated contract with him to end his contract early was $200,000. So the board has saved the district at least $160 some odd thousand just in salary. That doesn't take into account the reduced budgets that we have as a district, because we don't have 2 administrative budgets that we're operating out of. We only have 1. There's been significant savings that has come to the district because of that decision. You'll never hear that from the critical side of things, but I think that's a key thing for our patrons to know is, in any business situation, if you invest $200,000 and you get a $360,000 to $400,000 savings as a result, you're going to be celebrated. Unfortunately, with our critics, you're going to continue to be criticized for that decision, because they don't want our patrons to know that that actually resulted in additional savings to the district over the past 2 years. So that really brings us to classified positions. So I guess what I would say as a result of that is I do not believe that there's any way for us to cut administrative positions in the district. I think we've cut them to the absolute bare bone. I should know how the number of hours our principals are putting in, the number of hours our district employees, district level administrators are putting in. We're all sharing heavy workloads because the work hasn't changed. All those positions were there, and they weren't people that were just sitting around doing nothing, and so we've all had to take on those additional responsibilities and put in a lot of hours to make sure the work still gets done. But we've been happy to do that because we know it's the right decision for the district, and those savings matter. So classified positions, that is definitely where we have the most flexibility to some degree. And so I would just start with saying, we've talked about this in the past, but some of our classified positions we specifically created after our voters approved an increase to the supplemental levy in 2016. Very specifically, our elementary PE and music paraprofessionals, we did not have those prior to that increase, and we brought those back because our voters approved that increase. We also were able to add additional groundskeeping and maintenance positions. We heard a lot of criticism for a few years about the condition of our grounds. We took that to heart, and we added additional positions to take better care of those, and I think we've seen the results of that. Those will be very hard to maintain, those positions, if we don't have the supplemental levy. In fact, as you say, they're going to be impossible to maintain those positions without a supplemental levy. Some other places, even though there's not state law that governs those, it makes it very difficult for us to cut those positions. So for example, special education classified positions, there's a federal law that says we have to continue the same level of effort or investment in dollars in our students, that our special education students that we had the previous year. It's called maintenance of effort. So we can't go and lay off a bunch of special education paraprofessionals because it's illegal. Is there a better way to say that, Guy?
We could, but we would lose that same amount of money in our federal funds.
So, yep, so we do it and we end up losing that same funding. So it doesn't save us any dollars. The other place that could potentially be cut is stipend positions. I can't even imagine us running school without extracurricular activities. But the bottom line is we pay $1 million every year in salaries and mandatory benefits, and so that's things like Social Security contribution, PERSI for those people that are PERSI eligible, workers' comp, those types of benefits. So $1 million every year goes towards stipend positions. So these are really outside the scope of any state law, and there is significant savings that could be had there.
Some of those positions so that
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's all of our athletic. So these are primarily at the high school. So it's all of our sports programs. So all of our coaching positions, football, basketball, volleyball, soccer, cross country, golf. I mean, the list goes on that side. It also includes the additional pay that people like for co-curricular. So things like our drama programs, our debate programs, our music programs, our performing arts, so drama programs, those teachers receive an additional stipend to do the after-school portion of those programs. At the elementary and middle school, again, middle school, we do have some coaching stipends that are built into that, and some of those same performing arts stipends. Very few of this at the elementary level. They're basically paid for our website managers, and there was one other one at elementary, and I'm drawing a blank on it. So. Yep. So it's sports and those performing arts. That's by far the bulk of it.
So you're talking about all of that going away?
I'm saying that there's $1 million in savings, and if we have to get to a $10 million mark, and given those other restrictions we're facing, I personally don't see a way to do it. Now, if we really are in that situation, we're gonna have to put our heads together and really figure it out. But I really don't know how you get to $10 million without this type of a drastic cut. So those are the salaries and benefits side. Other potential, so then ways that we can reduce staff pay. So that's by reducing positions. So that's one option. Second option is to look at trying to reduce staff pay. So first of all, to reduce teacher salaries, there's two ways to do that. the first is we agree to it with the teachers in negotiations, or alternatively, the district could qualify for a financial emergency, and then the board could declare a financial emergency, and we could do it. The board could do it unilaterally. I think the loss of the supplemental levy would meet the threshold for the loss of funding, and we could do it. No, so it's a financial emergency. So there's a specific code that says, again, the two ways to reduce teacher salaries are you either agree to it through negotiations, or if the board is facing a financial emergency, and there's a specific definition of what that means. I can't remember what the percentage is.
4 or 5 different ways you can do that, but one of those is by a large percentage reduction in local ad deal.
Yep. So then the board would declare a financial emergency, and then the board could just say across the board we're reducing teacher salaries, and the union would not have to agree to that. So that's teachers. The challenge, and I don't think I highlighted this one. I did have a bullet on there. It's on actually the bottom one. The reality is we going back to my comment about the tight laws we have to follow, there are minimum salaries for teachers. And so while we could reduce teachers' pay for a lot of teachers, there are certain categories of teachers that we could not reduce their pay. Classified pay, same thing. We'd have to, if we reduced classified pay for specifically people in either title, I assume, Guy, right, Title I would qualify as well as special education, then that would violate the federal requirement for maintenance of effort. And so what that puts us in a position of is reducing pay for some employees and not for others. And then, so that's just like across the board, we're going to reduce what the salary schedule looks like. The other option that we used back in 2009 was the furlough days. It looks like we could save potentially $300,000 for a non-working, non-paid furlough day. But again, I think legally, I'm not sure we could do that for everybody because of the state minimum salary. So if somebody's making the state minimum and then we're going to say we're going to furlough give you 5 furlough days, that would reduce it below the state minimum. I'd have to talk with Doug Nelson, but I'm pretty sure that would not be legal. So another way is we could negotiate to freeze teachers on the salary schedule again this year. That's what we had to do this year with the state holdbacks. But again, some teachers, just like we did this year, some teachers would still get an increase because the minimum salary for teachers goes up next year. But we could potentially save $1.5 million if our teachers accepted being frozen on the salary schedule for 2 years in a row. There was no minimum salary in 2009. That law came into effect with the career ladder. And even after, I think the career ladder might have just been within the last 3 years that I think we got a state minimum salary. So that's really the bottom line, is we had a lot of flexibility in 2009 that we simply don't have now. 2009 is when they changed the use it or lose it law and let districts go down to 90.5%. And then the next year they brought in a law that basically, for our district, the effect of that law is we've lost 0.5% a year since 2011. So we're up to 96% now. So basically we've lost flexibility of about 6%. And that sounds like a small number. It's not a small number. I mean, hiring 6% fewer teachers for our district, that's about 40 teachers. And between salaries and benefits, you're talking 40 times about 70,000, 60,000, so $240,000 to $250,000 a year. No, $2.5 million. Sorry. Yeah, $2.5 million per year that we could be saving, but we can't. Yeah, and again, it's anyway, a class sizes would go up by about a student or two, but in exchange for that, we'd be realizing millions of dollars of savings. So then outside of that 90% salaries and benefits portion, there are a few ways we can save some dollars. We have a budget of about $500,000 per year from our operational budget that goes toward learning resources. We could simply not allocate that budget, and our teachers have limped by for a lot of years with less than adequate learning resources, and we could continue to do that. We spent another $300,000 per year in activity transportation. But our parents do have a pay-to-play fee, and that pay-to-play fee generates about $90,000 toward the district that we use for transportation. So $300,000 total cost, but our actual net cost after the parents' contribution is $210,000 that we would save. So between that and the salaries, we're looking at about a $1.2 million savings if we were to suspend our athletic and performing arts programs next year. From the plant facility side, we could potentially defer maintenance on about $500,000 to maybe $1 million. It's going to be pretty tight to get to $1 million. It's possible, but we're going to end up paying for that in the long term. I don't believe that that's a very good business strategy, but if we're in an emergency situation, there is about $500,000 to $1 million in our plant facilities budget that we could basically not allocate. The rest of the dollars really go towards ongoing annual costs that there really isn't a way to not spend those dollars. And then one of the comments that came through is, is there software that the district uses that you don't really have to have? I've thought of two. Qualtrics has been, I think, super valuable to us as a district. It's how we reach out and engage our parents and get feedback from our parents and from our students and from our staff. I think it's really helped us navigate through the shutdown and through reopening schools this year. We've had a ton of input from our parents, and it's been very helpful. But if we had to get by without it, we could get by without it. And we also, this is an interesting question, we do continue to provide Microsoft Office for our staff and for our students. Through that agreement, our students can actually purchase, or don't even have to purchase it, they can download that for free on their own devices. I think it's a great program. Microsoft predates our use of Google Apps, and we're using a ton of Google Apps now. And so if we really had to get by without Office, we could save about $50,000 to $60,000 if we stopped purchasing Office. So there is some savings that, again, I think there's reasons why we use that software. I don't think it's unnecessary. I don't think it's a waste. But again, if we're into a tight budget crunch and we're laying off people, then we've got to look at other things we're spending money on as well. So then we get into the additional revenue, and so fortunately, we should, I'm going to really emphasize the word should here, be receiving money from the federal government in response to the coronavirus. I want to start with highlighting the statement at the bottom, and that is the purpose for these funds coming from the federal government is to help schools safely reopen and sustain the safe operation and address the impact of coronavirus pandemic on students. That's what the funds are supposed to be used for. It's very clear in the federal guidance that's what they're supposed to be used for. They're not supposed to be used to give our patrons a tax break. If we have to, if the supplemental levy gets voted down, and we just have to use these to operate our schools, it's what we'll do, but it will come at a cost of how these dollars really could benefit our kids. And our kids, like we've talked about, our kids, we know we're struggling this year. I think they're struggling academically, but our teachers have done a great job in the classroom, but nonetheless, our kids are struggling still academically, and there's programs and things that we would love to do with these dollars to help address those that loss of learning for our kids. We know they're struggling socially and emotionally. There are some things we could do with our facilities to help improve the safe conditions inside of our classrooms with these dollars if they're available. So I just want to make sure that we understand there's a very specific purpose that those dollars are supposed to be used for, and that is going to make it difficult to use them for some other purposes. So just real quickly, we've talked about this in the past. Our original allocation came last summer. It was $1.4 million. We were told that we had to use that for unbudgeted expenses, which means, and that we had to use it very specifically to respond to coronavirus. And so we did use those dollars. Are they all spent, Guy? Spent or encumbered now. Primarily they went to Chromebooks, they went to internet access for our kids, they went for personal protective equipment, they went to give our teachers the supplies they needed to teach both remotely last spring, and also to help them transition into blended learning this fall. But I would just say we did exactly what we were asked to do, or told to do, and that is spend these dollars for things you haven't budgeted for. You can't put it away in your savings account. You need to spend them, and you have to spend them by a certain date, and do it to respond to the coronavirus. So those dollars are gone. ESER 2, probably the most important thing to know is this was authorized by the federal government in January, and it has still not been given to schools from the state. And so we're still waiting for the legislature to tell us, yep, you have authority to spend those dollars. And they've also basically put us in a situation where our only option to use those dollars is to backfill the loss of revenue from the state this year. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but that's the bottom line for us this year. Is there's not going to be any additional dollars, and the state board may make a difference on the bottom line with this one, but right now the bottom line with SR2 is we're going to be $500,000 upside down on what our state holdback was compared to what we're getting from SR2. The state board again may take action or may have the legislature take action for us to not be $500,000 upside down, but that's all discussion and nothing's actually been finalized or provided to us.
I don't know why you don't have full confidence in the legislature.
I don't know either. So,
They've been great.
yeah,
They're really awesome.
yeah. So, and one of the challenges with SR2 is
Public servants.
is again the directive from the state or from the federal government is these dollars should have been released to schools immediately. They haven't been. They were given to the state in January. They're supposed to be released. I can't remember what the deadline was, but it was within a very short time period, and we're sitting here in April and still haven't received authority to use those dollars. And it looks like the state's only going to give us authority to use half of the dollars this year and then the other half next year when there's not a budget holdback. So that's awesome that that's really what's led to that $500,000 deficit. So then the last round, SR3, this is, or ARP, I think is another acronym for the same thing. This is the one that was authorized under President Biden's administration. Again, still not authorized by the legislature, and so as much as people want us to include this in our budget for next year, we can't include money that hasn't been provided to us in our budget. We still don't know whether the state's going to hold back any funding. There really hasn't been discussion of that, but there wasn't discussion of it last year, and so I still have a hard time trusting that there couldn't be state holdbacks that we would have to use to back these dollars to backfill next year. And then out of that $11 million, it's not a wide open use it for whatever you want to. 20% has to be used to address learning loss and address student social emotional needs. And then a really interesting thing, going back to that same thing we talked about earlier on the federal funds, if we lose a supplemental levy and we use these ESSER $3 all in 1 year, so that $11 million, if you subtract the 20% out, it's going to be pretty close to the combination of the loss of the supplemental and the plant facilities. So if we simply replace it with these dollars, it's going to create this huge spike in our federal dollars for 1 year, and we won't be able to continue that maintenance of effort the next year. And so then they're going to start withholding our federal dollars in subsequent years to make up what we haven't been able to maintain. So we're going to be shooting ourselves in the foot again if that's the position we're put in. So it doesn't paint a very bright picture on what our options are going forward, other than I hope and pray that our patrons will recognize the needs that we have and will support renewing those levies.
Well, Scott, is this on?
Just need a blue light on it, if that helps any.
Okay. The problem with the ESSER money, as I see it, is it's a one-time shot. And it creates a problem that you discussed.
Yeah.
And that is, the money's here, it's not here the next year, but if they, for budgetary purposes, if they see we've had all that money, and they, okay, moving forward, that's not available. So, I don't know, we just have to have it, we just have to work with the budget, with the dollars that we have available to us. And the one factor that drove home to me with this last election is that our district has become dependent on revenue that is not dependable. And that's a difficult position for the district to be in. I'm in favor of the supplemental levy. I wish that we could, as we move forward, if we could plan to gradually maybe reduce that if we can somehow cover costs or increase revenue from the state or somehow, but gradually plan to reduce that over a 10-year period, for example, and work towards that. With the growth that Heath talked about, I don't know if that's,
Yeah.
how that would look, but
Yeah.
you just can't do it in 1 year.
Yeah. No, I wholeheartedly agree. It's conversations we've had. Greg has been, talking about that as we've seen increased funding from the state, is it possible to decrease the supplemental? I do think it's possible. Especially with the state funding, what we call the third level of the career ladder, the advanced professional rungs, I do believe that we'll be able to use that to potentially reduce how much we have to pay out of the supplemental. There's other things, though, that it's really going to take some hard decisions on our part of if we truly want to wean away from the supplemental levy, that's going to take cuts. It's not just going to be matching the teacher salary schedule from the state. It's going to take more than that, and those cuts will impact programs for our kids. But you're right. I had multiple conversations with patrons. One theme was, if these aren't supplemental dollars, you shouldn't call it a supplemental levy. I wholeheartedly agree. These are not supplemental. They're very much operational. They're critical to what we do as a district. Nonetheless, the state law describes them as supplemental, and that's the language we have to use. But these are critical dollars for the success of our kids.
I guess it's not really a question as much as it is a comment. At what point do we start losing the very fine staff that we have carefully handpicked and gathered over a period of years? At what point do they say, we can't do this?
Yeah.
I guess the other comment I would make is I really appreciate the hard work of our superintendent. I think the board has noticed that and watched that, and for anybody to say that we're overstaffed administratively, they're just not aware of what's going on in the district. And so I'm very appreciative of the hard work that you've put in personally, Scott, because I've seen it. And the same goes with our other administrators. So, I just hope our patrons recognize that.
Yeah. I do think what will help is as we continue to get growth in the district, and we can control, to a degree, our costs. When we have to build a school, it's going to be hard to do, but I do anticipate that we'll see our levy rate continue to drop, and as we get closer to what our neighboring district's levy rate is, that will certainly help. And thankfully, we've seen commercial growth and not just residential. I was talking to my in-laws in Shelley. They're in a tough spot because they have all residential and agriculture, and we've been blessed that thankfully we have a growing commercial tax base, and that really does take some of the burden off of our homeowners.
Well, and there's no motion for this, Scott.
No, this is just a report to the board.
FYI.
Yep.
And, I'm assuming we'll just keep on talking about this until
Well,
the levy
yeah, so, guys,
goes on.
I think Guy's intent, I'm not sure how you're doing the budget right now. Guy, do you know how you're doing the budget? That March levy date was critical because it really helped govern how we were going to set the budget, and now we're in a bit of a quandary on what it looks like and how to proceed with teacher negotiations.
Yeah, I think probably the most difficult part right now is the ESSER 3. The way they're talking is it could be allocated over 3 years, and so we wouldn't even have the choice to dump it all into next year. And so I'm just trying to make sure that I'm ready so that when we know those answers, we'll know. Are we willing to take our fund balance to operate? Yeah.
And we have 3 million, is that right, in our fund balance?
The audit last year
election date is May 16th?
18th.
Okay. And deadlines in terms of negotiations and budgeting issues?
So, by statute, we have to issue contracts to teachers before July 1st. Our goal is to conclude negotiations before teachers leave, so they have their contract and they know what their, yeah,
Ideally, negotiations are done by the end of May.
Yeah.
Whatever.
yep,
Ish.
yep.
Budget.
So the budget hearing, we have a action item, is that right, Mary? Tonight to push the June meeting back to give us a little bit more window on the budget hearing.
Okay.
Definitely not fun. To talk about, I mean, you know, all of the administrators in here have students in our district, and I have students in our district, and, you know, it's frustrating because this isn't just about sticking it to the district and making them tamp down things. The things that are going to be tamped down are impacting our kids.
Yeah,
And that's the frustrating piece of it, is
Yeah.
that any way, shape, or form that this doesn't pass, then
yeah.
the impacts are brutal to
Yeah.
the kids.
Yeah, and some of the, I didn't really go into this, but some of my frustration is in talking with patrons who voted no. You know, they had a specific, some had a specific, well, I can't believe you spent this money on that. That's a waste. And when I said, well, the reality is there's a line item from the state that says we have to spend the money in this category. I couldn't use it to do what you thought I should do. I had to use it for this event or this, not that thing specifically, but for teacher professional learning or for whatever it is. And there's just that lack of understanding. So sometimes people perceive something as being not necessary and perceive a higher need and not understand that, again, our budget is very much controlled at the state level, and we have very little discretion in a lot of areas on what we can spend and can't spend.